for the risk engine system. It's a very clever system that uses data from different sources, therefore very suitable also for the coordinated border management approach. And the system is so good that the risk profile effectiveness surged by 274%. And the number of seizures increased by 355%. I have to say that it's good not to be a smuggler or a bad guy because I think the chance of being detected is extremely high, as also the seizures, the recent seizures at Dubai Airport have shown, and I think you have all seen the magazine Al-Furda that highlights these seizures. This is only one award that I've mentioned, but Dubai Customs got also the 2013 Network World Award for the security of the risk engine and other systems. So I think it's really a very appropriate place to be. And with that, I would like to introduce Mr. Jumal Gait, the Executive Director of the Customs Development. He's closely involved in all these state-of-the-art developments. And please, may I ask you to come to the floor?
Good evening and welcome to this session. Once I get this technology to work properly for me. Today we'll be speaking about our experience in the border management, and we are going to present a roadmap to implement it actually. Rather than speaking about high level, I'd like to take the floor to a lower level and explain something about our implementation of the border management, and hopefully it will be useful to everyone. We'll be first talking about the 4 C's of border management, as well as come across the WCO SAFE framework and what we need in terms of capability on the border to have the needed capabilities. And then hopefully we'll be presenting some of the results based on what we have implemented. As you know, our mission is basically to balance between trade facilitation as well as compliance and enforcement. This is becoming a very challenging aspect in our day-to-day. We are seeing a lot of border breaches. They come in different form and color. They come like drugs. You can have as well as biohazards, weapon of mass destruction, but they're all trying to breach our border, get into the country, and then you know the consequences. I will be presenting also something on some statistics related to these breaches. First of all, here are some statistics. The pharmaceuticals, the software, the oil industry, and electronic industry, they are suffering a lot of cost due to these breaches, due to the illegal smuggling of goods into the countries or into or any forfeiting. We can see also that the drugs users worldwide have reached about 27 million. That's the official statistics. And to deal with these drug users, we have to spend about $200 to $250 billion just to treat them. Because of drugs, we have lost about 0.5% of the world GDP. And we also have about almost 1% rate in death worldwide was due to drugs abuse. Diseases such as hepatitis C is easily transferred between the users of drugs. More closely to our region, we can see human trafficking also increasing. There is a lot of human trafficking happening from all over the world, but we can feel it here. More than 16,000 trafficking cases were caught, but the ones that are not caught, probably in the hundreds of thousands. We need to do something about the border. The border is where things happen. And we have come up with a simple concept of the 4 C's of border management. Once implemented, hopefully we'll have a safer border. It starts off with communication, then you move on to cooperation, and after that we move to coordination and collaboration. At each stage, there is a goal, there's an objective that we have to adhere to, or we want to have a result about it. To start off with, in the communication, we need to identify who are the stakeholders, who are our border partners. Then we move into the cooperation by sharing information and sharing resources. And hopefully then we can move to close interagency interaction, as well as later on we go beyond coordination, that is collaboration, to reach a common risk management accountability at the border. Now, to do all of that, we need to factor in 3 things: people, process, and technology. With respect to people, you can always have assignment of, once you have identified who are your partner, identify also a liaison officer, a contact person. Then we can move into sharing the knowledge. And if we can progress further, we can do cross-training between the 2 border agencies so that hopefully one can delegate the responsibility to another. With respect to processes, we need to start with bilateral and multilateral meetings. The aim is to move to the next step to align the business processes, and further on move to re-engineering the processes to have an optimized process for all the agencies at the border, so that hopefully we can get a one-stop shop or a one-stop border point rather than having multiple and you have to cross. In terms of technology, after identifying what type of technologies and resources are available, we can move into sharing the solution and the system. That is, give me access to your system and I'll give you access to mine, so that you can do ad hoc inquiries. However, if we want to move even further or mature to a later stage, system-to-system integration can have the communication happen seamlessly without interfere. And hopefully, after that, we can move to a single window and decision support systems. That is, sharing accountability, sharing the resources, and being able to do business at the border as a single unit. Those are the 4 C's that we feel that are important, and hopefully this will be helpful. We've identified, of course, according to us in Dubai, a number of border partners, local and international. They are helping us in receiving information, exchanging information, as well as aligning our processes with their processes. This helps the risk mitigation to feed into our systems and to be able to protect the border. We have to also consider the SAFE framework. As you know, there are multiple requirements by WCO, and the SAFE framework is there to help us and guide us towards border management. So one of the main border management or WCO SAFE framework pillars is the harmonization of the advanced electronic cargo information. I'm not going to repeat what has been said already, but the WCO data model, adherence to it, the UN standards. If implemented properly, then you can have a connected government. You can have government to government or business to government integration. The other pillar is employment of consistent risk management practices. This can be done in multiple ways. Risk management practices, actually there are methodologies that you can off the shelf use, or you can implement a risk cycle as well as reconciliation initiatives. This I will be explaining in my speech later on. The third pillar is meeting minimal supply chain security standard and best practices. This is easily achieved by having a client accreditation program. You can know who are your green list customers versus yellow versus red. By having that, then you can easily scan and search during the declaration processing. Internally, you can employ as well as the other security measures, something like the ISO 27000. It is a standard which ensures that your information is secured. And as well as encryption of the information transmission. This can be easily achieved through implementing a digital certificate and digital signature so that you can ensure that the information you are sending or transmitting is secured and the information you are receiving is secured. And finally, we have the safety and security of shipment using non-intrusive detection equipment. We have implemented in Dubai Customs at Jebel Ali Port a system that allows us to scan the containers, but at the same time scan for radioactive materials. That is, instead of doing two processes, we managed to combine it in one machine so that we can save time and it is fast in processing. This helped us to detect many of the seizures that we have made, and it is really proven to be very successful. We are in the 50% of implementation. We're going to be implementing about 4 scanners in the coming year. We can do all of that, but how? The question is how to build your capabilities. What do you need to focus on to build your capabilities? Capabilities, like I said before, depends on people, it depends on processes, and it depends on technology. You have to address all these 3 areas in order to have effective border management and coordination. Staff can be trained, and they have to be trained, they have to be educated on various aspects to become a true 360-degree customs officer. They have to be trained in behavioral skills, they have to be trained in trade affairs, as well as enforcement. But all the training that we do is not going to be good enough until we have integrity. You can train your staff to be at the border as effective as you want, but if they don't have the integrity, then things will go through. And this is the most important thing about the border in terms of people. As far as the process is concerned, like I mentioned, implementing risk management methodologies. This is something has been there for a long time. We use it in IT, we use it in strategic planning, but it can also be employed at an operational level by implementing a solution to help you in your intelligence cycle. Your intelligence cycle starts with the collection of information, collating the information, analyzing it, and disseminating it to the different stakeholders, whether internal department or external department, or even your risk engine that you have at your systems. Since this is an IT event, I'll focus a little bit more on the IT. Now, the concept is information-based risk management. Because we have so much wealth of information, we can actually be smarter about doing risk management now. Business intelligence, advanced analytics, risk engines, information reconciliation, as well as predictive modeling. Actually, predictive modeling is the next goal for us, is to be able to predict a risk that did not happen yet. And this requires a very specialized algorithms and systems that can help us really predict what might go wrong. But we still have a lot of information. We still have a lot of systems that we can do risk management with. Business intelligence, for example, you have a lot of data in your operational data in which you can drill down, slice and dice, and try to focus on the areas that are important or the risky transactions that are important. However, this is something reactive. We can move to something called real-time business intelligence. Real-time business intelligence actually is an operational dashboard that you can implement, and it's easy to implement. You can actually look at the transaction as they happen and refresh this dashboard. So you can see the hits based on your risk engine. You can see the hits that get identified by the system, and in fact you can have different kind of views. Over here we're showing a view in which these risks have originated from these countries all over the world. But like I said, this is a real-time information display of what's happening in operation. Further, you can use the information to have advanced analytics. Advanced analytics, again, it's about the information that you already have. You can implement solutions that allow you to find the relationships between different kind of entities or different kind of fields. Like, for example, we're showing an example here about a company or a PO box, that is shared by multiple companies. However, all the companies have the same owner except the one on the top, which is not having the same owner. So this tool is helping us find out the relationship. Then we further dig down and we can see that he is importing a commodity which is actually not part of his activity that in which he's registered. For example, he's importing food when his activity is supposed to be jewelry. So these kind of tools can help us in our investigation and to have advanced analytics to try and pinpoint or have intelligence in our systems. But most importantly is to have your operating model working in harmony. In Dubai Customs, we have our operating model split into three. The first level is the intelligence layer, in which information is gathered. Information is shared with agencies outside Dubai Customs and inside Dubai Customs. Then the risk management and intelligence cycle hits, the one I explained earlier, regarding the collection and collation and analyzing information. That produces risk profiles. It then entered into our risk engine, which is in the heart of our trade facilitation, because the risk engine can work in both ways, protection and facilitation. And therefore, it is sitting in our protection level. Whenever we have a hit, then that hit is diverted to the compliance department. But again, like I said, because it is in the heart of our core operation, it is so vital, it is important for our protection. So having a tool like a risk engine is a must. And furthermore, this is perhaps some administrations have not reached to this level, and we are working on it. Regarding the information reconciliation, as you know, we receive multiple information from multiple sources. The declaration comes from a declarant or a broker, and he is telling us a story about what he is importing or exporting. However, the same information we receive from our agents in the manifest. And therefore, we are able to do the reconciliation and find out what is wrong or who's saying a lie. Like that, we have multiple examples that we are implementing in Dubai Customs, as far as the manifest and the declaration, as far as the manifest and load list and discharge list. This is also a good reconciliation to help you find out who's not telling the truth, as well as manifest and carrier. We have also the load list and carrier, again discharge and carrier. We can authenticate and ensure client authenticity when he make a claim for a refund by looking at the load list as well as the declaration and so on and so forth. This is proven to be very powerful because the information is already you have in your hand. You don't have to go for a very sophisticated system that will predict anything in the future. This information you already have, you only have to reconcile it and find out what is wrong. After finding out what is wrong, you can either operationalize it in your risk engine, or you can have your post-clearance audit to go and investigate it further or do whatever you want with the information. Now, if we do this the right way, if we implement the 4 C's, that is coordinating the border, if we implement the safe framework guidelines, if we then implement or build our capabilities in people, process, and technology, we are bound to have positive results. I'll quickly go through these results that we have in Dubai Customs. Most recently, we have made some good seizures about the African ivory, the information, and as well as the Tramadol and Captagon. I am proud to say that these seizures were the outcome of a proper implementation of data analysis, investigation, without any tips from any outsider. That means the intelligence cycle is working properly, the process, also the people who were trained, as well as the technology. When you have all of that working in harmony, you can get such results. And these were some of the results we have. We managed also, in terms of the compliance, improve the seizures in terms of the number of the seizures that are happening because of implementing a risk engine. In terms of trade facilitation, you can see that our intervention rate, although the transactions are increasing, the intervention rate is decreasing because we stopped looking at the declaration or the transaction that are not important for us. And this is how we can say that our intervention rate has gone to 13. Hopefully, we'll reach to about 10% of our transaction in the near future by modifying our risk profiles, by improving our practices, and most importantly, by having a coordinated border management. I can say that nowadays we have about 100% of the declarations being processed are assessed through the risk engine. We have seen also a growth in the auto clearance of transaction within seconds. That is, we are not interested in these transactions, but we're only interested in 3% of the transactions. We've seen also that the compliance has increased to about 87%. We can see also some post-clearance audit finding improving because we have implemented all these technologies. We have seen also a huge increase in the valuation cases. Believe it or not, by combining the information that we know about the price of goods and what is being declared through the system, we have found a lot of cases of mismatch. I'm sure you have implemented some of these. However, looking at prohibited goods seizures have increased dramatically to 300% and more. Counterfeiting goods also have increased. And the country of origin has also increased to 250. Now, we also are very proud to have received recognition from the WCO based on the latest Columbus report, in which they have mentioned that after doing their analysis and investigation, that Dubai Custom is really mature and having good IT systems that can be considered as world-class and which other customer organizations can learn from. This happened, I think, by the end of last year. Most importantly, Suzanne had already mentioned some of the awards that we won, but the dearest to our heart is the Dubai Government Excellence Award, in which we have won 2 consecutive years awards related to trade facilitation, which is the B2G award for our system B2G. And last year we won the Risk Engine Award for the compliance of enforcement. So as you can see, we're trying to balance between the 2 aspects of trade facilitation as well as enforcement. Well, I've reached my conclusion, and I would like to end this presentation with a little bit of a concept. What will you do, or how can you increase your border? There is a couple of ways. One is forbidden, which is to overtake another country. Then you can increase your border. Take another country, increase your border. Or you can do it the peaceful way. I'll tell you how you do that. Our border is limited to our country. It is limited to the region. But how can we increase it to be the whole globe, to be our border? Well, simply, we can do it because an export declaration or a transaction in one country is the import declaration in another. So if we share the information, if we have custom-to-custom integration, globally network customs, then we can easily have a advanced risk mitigation and increase our border. As simple as that. I'd like to end my presentation by saying that this challenge that we have, by implementing the best practices, we can make all these vanish and have a better protected border in the whole world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very impressive presentation, and congratulations for the awards. I think it's really, you have seen how impressive the implementation of the principles of safe framework of standards are and of the compliance continuum. I have to say also the fact that each declaration is risk assessed in less than a second shows that it can be done, and that facilitation and security facilitation and enforcement are going hand in hand. So it's very impressive, and I'm sure you will have plenty of questions, and there will be 3 days during which you can speak to Dubai Customs and ask for more details. That leads me now to the next keynote address from CITES. The Secretary General, John Scanlon, is with us. And I'd like to mention, before introducing him, that the WCO has a very close working relationship with CITES. On the one hand, of course, because CITES protection of species. Customs officers at the border implement the rules, but also we managed to dematerialize the certificate, the e-permit, together with our colleagues from CITES, which is very relevant in the context of single window and of exchanging data, customs to customs electronically, and also with other agencies. If I may ask Mr. Scanlon to come to the podium.
Thank you very much, Your Highnesses, Excellencies, Secretary-General of the World Customs Organization, Mr. Cunho Mukeria, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to be invited to join you here today, and I express my sincere gratitude to Dubai Customs for being such a generous host of this most impressive meeting. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, known by its acronym CITES, is the preeminent global instrument for regulating international trade in wildlife. While CITES is both a conservation and a trade-related convention, it neither promotes nor discourages trade. Rather, it regulates trade when it does take place to ensure it is legal, sustainable, and traceable. Countries have sovereign rights over their own biological resources, and the decision on whether or not to trade is one for them to determine, subject to meeting their international commitments. The 178 countries that are party to CITES have agreed to regulate international trade in certain species that are threatened with extinction, as well as some species that are not yet threatened with extinction, but could become so if trade is not strictly regulated. When a party to CITES decides to trade in CITES-listed wildlife, the Convention provides the global mechanisms to ensure that such trade is not detrimental to the survival of the species in the wild. It places obligations on source, transit, and destination states, and states are obliged, amongst other matters, to take appropriate measures to enforce the provisions of the Convention, to prohibit trade in species that violates the Convention, as well as to ensure that specimens pass through any formalities required for trade with a minimum of delay. The Executive Director of Customs Development, who we've just heard from, talked about protection and facilitation, and that very much translates to the CITES Convention as well. Successfully implementing CITES requires international cooperation across national borders on a daily basis, land, sea, and air. Heads of state and governments at Rio+20, held in Rio de Janeiro in June of last year, recognised the important role of CITES, and I quote, as an international agreement that sits at the intersection between trade, the environment, and development. Distinguished delegates, CITES currently regulates international trade in about 35,000 species of wild plants and animals and their derivatives, with close to 1 million trade transactions occurring every year. At the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to CITES, held in Bangkok, Thailand in March of this year, hundreds of new timber species were brought under CITES controls, along with 5 commercially harvested shark species and all manta rays, which will bring with it some implementation challenges, including for customs. In fact, all of the commercially valuable timber of Madagascar was brought under CITES control at our last Conference of the Parties at the request of Madagascar, and I'm delighted to learn that the head of customs is with us here at this meeting. Of the CITES listed species, 3% are threatened with extinction, and they are found on Appendix 1 of our convention. Commercial trade in these species is generally prohibited, such as for most elephants and rhino, as well as tigers and great apes, and certain timbers and marine life. However, the vast majority of species, or approximately 97% of them, are not necessarily threatened with extinction, but they could become so if international trade is not strictly regulated. The legal trade in such species is worth billions of dollars annually. By way of example, $1 billion is generated annually at the upper end of the value trade for trade in just 3 CITES-listed pythons. And 1 litre of Aguileria crassa, an oil derived from agar wood, is valued at $80 million. The benefits of regulated trade for local and indigenous communities are significant. For example, the vicuña, a cousin of the llama, was close to extinction in the 1960s in the Andean countries, with less than 6,000 individuals left in the wild. In 1975, countries decided to prohibit its commercial trade under CITES. Today, the wool of the vicuña can be traded under strict regulatory controls, and the population of the vicuña now exceeds 350,000, and it provides a secure livelihood for local communities. Such conservation efforts can, however, be undermined by illegal trade. For example, the illegal trade in the 3 python species I referred to earlier is estimated to be of the same value as the legal trade, namely in the order of $1 billion per year. And this illegal trade is severely undermining the sustainability of this trade. The regulation of trade in CITES-listed species is made through a universally recognised system of permits and certificates. Data from these permits and certificates are compiled each year and submitted to the Secretariat for inclusion in the CITES Trade Database, which has over 13 million records to date. This is arguably the world's most extensive global database on the sustainable use of wildlife, and it is freely available on the CITES website. We are a convention that makes best use of modern technologies. As CITES celebrates in 2013 its 40th anniversary since it was adopted in Washington, DC, with many conservation successes, it also confronts the worst spike in the illegal killing of elephant and rhino and the illegal trade in ivory and horn that we have seen in decades. This is increasingly driven by organised crime and, in some cases, rebel militia groups. These disturbing trends are putting at risk the good conservation gains of the past decades, and they threaten the very survival of these species in the wild. The illegal trade in ivory and rhino horn has now reached a scale that poses an immediate risk to the survival of these species at a local and a regional level. It also poses a risk to people, including those who are serving in the front lines to protect our wildlife, who are being injured and killed in the protection of our wildlife. This criminal activity can also pose a serious threat to social and economic stability, as well as to national security. It is quite literally robbing countries of their natural resources and of their cultural heritage, and it is undermining good governance and the rule of law. It must be stopped, and the UN Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice recently resolved to encourage its member states to make illicit trafficking in wild fauna and flora a serious crime when organised criminal groups are involved. Distinguished delegates, we are confronted with many challenges and many opportunities. In addressing them, it is apparent that CITES and the World Customs Organization share common objectives: facilitating legal and sustainable trade, whilst ensuring that illicit trade can be identified, intercepted, and responded to effectively. The CITES and the WCO secretariats enjoy a very close working relationship, and we have done so for many years. And in fact, the working relationship gives practical effect to the Memorandum of Understanding that was signed between the two organisations back in 1996. It is customs that provides the frontline assurance that trade remains legal and sustainable. It works to ensure that requisite trade documentation is authentic and valid, thereby ensuring that legal trade remains legal and intersects illegal trade. This critical role contributes to the sustainable use of wildlife and to the livelihoods of local and Indigenous communities. Simply stated, CITES efforts could not succeed without the contribution of customs, and I think it was very apparent from the excellent presentation from the Executive Director of Customs Development in terms of that interconnection between the Convention and the work of customs. Yet no matter how effective the relationship is between CITES and the World Customs Organization, we cannot do it all alone. Like so many other forms of trafficking, the illegal trade in wildlife increasingly involves organised crime groups using sophisticated harvesting and smuggling techniques, alongside violence towards and attempts to bribe law enforcement officials. An excellent example of a whole-of-government type approach being taken at the global level is the collaborative initiative to combat wildlife crime known as the International Consortium to Combat Wildlife Crime, often known by its acronym ICWIC. And I would like to here pay tribute to Secretary-General Mickey Rea, who embraced the idea of such a consortium when it was first proposed in 2009 and came into effect in 2010. This consortium is comprised of the CITES Secretariat, Interpol, the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, the World Customs Organization, and the World Bank. And it was established to usher in a new era where the perpetrators of serious wildlife crimes faced a more formidable and coordinated response. And we were doing a lot of our work directly with frontline enforcement officers. For example, we recently trained officers from 18 countries across Africa and Asia in the enforcement technique known as controlled deliveries. This is a technique that enables you to ascertain who is the kingpin, who is behind the illicit trade, rather than just catching the poacher in the front line. Distinguished delegates, we are aware that today customs officers have a multitude of tasks to perform and a myriad of contraband forms to watch out for, as was very apparent from the last presentation. We are working with many partners, including the World Customs Organization, to help find and to deploy new and creative ways to use state-of-the-art technology to support the indispensable role of customs officers in regulating international wildlife trade. And I would like to now share a few examples of what is being done with you. One of the very concrete results from our partnership with the World Customs Organization has been the inclusion of standards for CITES electronic permitting systems in the WCO data model. This achievement assists parties to CITES in developing national and regional e-permitting systems that are harmonised with international standards and to single windows environments. This will result in more effective ways to control international trade in wildlife and contribute to an integrated interagency approach in achieving desired objectives, primarily with regard to efforts related to more effective, coordinated border management. We greatly appreciate the contribution of the World Customs Organization through their participation in the CITES e-permitting working group, which also involves many other partners. The inclusion of CITES e-permitting standards in the World Customs Organization data model is not just good for CITES. It also paves the way for many other multilateral environmental agreements. For example, the Nagoya Protocol on Access to Genetic Resources can use the standards agreed between CITES and the World Customs Organization and found in the World Customs Organization data model for the development of their requisite electronic regulatory systems. This will reduce cost, development time, and provide for more secure, error-free, and traceable systems for their trade. Reflective of the benefits gained by this collaboration is a project funded by the European Union that has seeded a larger-scale $3 million infrastructure project to assist member countries of the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization to develop and implement CITES e-permitting systems that are harmonized with national single-window environments. This project, which is drawing on state-of-the-art Brazilian technology, is a great example of South-South cooperation, and it's also reached out to countries in southern Africa to invite their participation. Another project which will engender great cooperation with customs officials in this field is the linking of CITES electronic resources on species with electronic trade documentation. Under this project, users of the CITES electronic system will be able to pull species information required on a permit from the CITES electronic checklist, which contains the official nomenclature of the almost 35,000 species that are under the control of the Convention. This will reduce errors, allow for connection with and identification of other species-related databases, and it will provide customs officials with common names as well as scientific names. CITES is also using DNA technologies to better identify and trace species in trade and to fight illegal trade in wildlife. For example, in 2012, the Global Environment Facility provided South Africa with a multi-million-dollar project to reduce poaching of rhinoceros and the illegal trade in their horns by strengthening enforcement capacity through forensic-based technologies. Other efforts to provide countries with access to cutting-edge DNA technologies include discussions with the Consortium for the Barcode of Life initiative under the Smithsonian Institute, where 6 target countries from developing regions will use these technologies to assist with the prosecution of those engaging in the illegal trade of CITES-listed species. Initially, parties will have access to the genetic information on approximately 2,000 CITES-listed species that have experienced high levels of trade. Parties at the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to our Convention adopted a decision which directs that range states of the queen conch, this is a mollusk that is fished in the Caribbean waters primarily for its meat, should collaborate in exploring ways to enhance the traceability of specimens in international trade, including but not limited to catch certificates, labelling systems, and the application of genetic techniques, representing the first time CITES parties will use such techniques to better regulate trade in marine species. The Secretariat is also working with the private sector, and I reach out to all of the private sector representatives here today to help customs and enforcement officials in the field with handheld devices to better monitor legal trade, identify species, and monitor poaching and the illegal killing of species such as the elephant and the rhino. And efforts are also underway to use devices to better track illegal trade in timber, and we've recently released a detailed report with our partner, the International Tropical Timber Organization, on this issue. These efforts, we hope, will facilitate the work of customs officials by providing more secure systems, better identification tools, and the ability to trace the complete international trade supply chain in a particular species or range of species. This will contribute to reducing illegal trade and to ensuring legal, sustainable, and traceable trade. A number of electronic capacity building tools have also been developed to assist customs to better understand the Convention and assist with the identification of species, which is critical for those serving in the front line. For example, the CITES Virtual College offers a number of courses, including one for enforcement officers and another specifically designed for customs officials on the provisions of the Convention and the mechanisms it has to regulate trade. These courses are open to any officials wishing to improve their knowledge of the Convention. Other capacity building efforts in collaboration with the World Customs Organization include the designing of the next phase of the very successful project GAPEN, Great Apes in Integrity, which now targets illegal trade in great apes, elephants, rhinoceros, and pangolins, including by sharing CITES trading materials. Under the Green Customs Initiative, the CITES Secretariat developed a number of electronic presentations on how to identify species and their derivatives, including one on ivory, artificially propagated and wild plants, and crocodile skins, amongst many others. We found that these presentations have been very popular with customs officials who are working in the field. The collaborative approach achieved by CITES Secretariat and the World Customs Organization and other international organizations and initiatives working to better regulate international trade in wildlife is increasing the efficiency and the effectiveness of efforts by countries to ensure that such trade is legal and sustainable, particularly efforts that have sought to use new technologies to achieve these desirable objectives. Customs has been and remains a key and indispensable partner for CITES. The Conference of the Parties to CITES, in common with many other institutions within and outside of the United Nations, regularly call for synergies and collaboration amongst international and intergovernmental organisations. There are few better examples of successful collaboration than the one between our two organisations, and few international treaties that are better served by the customs community than CITES. Distinguished delegates, it is through their tireless efforts, day in, day out, that the World Customs Organization and frontline customs officers from right across the globe are ensuring that wild animals and plants, in their many beautiful and varied forms, will be protected for this generation and generations to come, for which we express our profound gratitude. I sincerely thank you once again for inviting me here today, and we look forward to our ongoing collaboration.
Thank you very much, Secretary General John Scanlon. I have to say I liked very much however active cooperation WCO CITES is. We cannot do it alone, and I do think that this is exactly also part of the collaborative effort in all areas, and it's not only between international organizations that have all to work together, but also at national level, the agencies have to cooperate. With that, because we are running a little bit behind, I would like to announce the first roundtable on integrated, collaborative or coordinated border management. What's in a name? You might be aware there are different concepts, different names used. Everybody understands something slightly different, and therefore it will be very interesting to listen to the speakers of this first roundtable of this conference. The facilitator is George Weiss, the Executive Vice President for Sandler and Travis Trade Advisory Services. He is a good friend of ours, and here he comes. He was Commissioner of US Customs and is recognized as one of the authorities on customs trade and supply chain matters. George, the floor is yours, and maybe if I may call...
Be here with these distinguished panelists that I'm sharing this roundtable discussion with. We're going to be changing the pace a bit from what you've had so far, in that the challenge that I have, and I'm called a facilitator, not a moderator, it is my responsibility to ensure that we have an active interaction, not only amongst us here at the panel, but amongst you, the audience, as well. We are running a little bit behind schedule, so in order to try to pick things up a bit, we have one panelist, and before I introduce the panelists that are before you, we have one panelist who unfortunately is not able to be with us, but will be joining us by video, and that's Raymond Benjamin, the Secretary General of the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO. He has a video that I've been told, we have not had the opportunity to view it, but it's not of the best quality, and I'm going to introduce it now and have you see the video, because I don't want to disrupt the interaction that I'm hoping we're going to get once I can introduce the other panelists. So if we can just see the video, and then we'll come back, and then we'll begin introduction of the panelists and really get engaged in an active discussion on this topic. So let's see the video first.
Distinguished conference delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to have the opportunity this meeting to help set the tone for this World Customs Organization conference on effective solutions for coordinated border management. Although I could not be in Dubai today due to some unavoidable commitments, I'm honored to be able to provide this video address to your opening roundtable session. As the focus of your discussion today will be centered upon integrated, collaborative, or coordinated border management, I would like to begin by reviewing how ICAO promotes collaborative approaches to border control at airports. Border management is by no means a new concept for ICAO. In fact, our organization has been engaged in regulating these processes at international airports in collaboration with relevant agencies since 1949. ICAO's role is a very natural one in this area, in as much as effective border management relies significantly on coordination between multiple state authorities. Where airports are concerned, the basis for coordination in border control processes can be found in Annex 9 to the Chicago Convention on International Civil Aviation. Wisely, the drafters of the Annex understood the value of facilitating border clearance formalities for aircraft crews, passengers, and cargo. They agreed on several articles concerned exclusively with immigration, customs, and health matters, as well as the administration of pertinent regulations at international airports. Annex 9 in particular contains the standards and recommended practices with respect to facilitation. Under the provision of this annex, ICAO's member states are committed to implement standards that maximize border control efficiencies while ensuring effective security. The requirement to facilitate border crossing processes applies not only to civil aviation authorities, but to a number of other agencies as well. These include customs, immigration, foreign affairs, agriculture, law enforcement, finance, public health, tourism, security, narcotics control, and passport and visa issuing authorities. At the operational level, Annex 9 further requires that states set up coordination programs at airports to facilitate border clearance formalities. At the highest level, the ICAO Assembly has encouraged states for many years to engage in related regional and sub-regional coordination programs. States are urged to consult one another on common problems in the facilitation field, as well as to agree on uniform solutions to such problems. ICAO's facilitation policy has the same objective as the World Customs Organization's coordinated border management concept in this regard. Our shared goal in this area is to ensure that varied government agencies work together and adopt a harmonized response to border control challenges. And I should point out here that this is an area where ICAO also practices what it preaches. For many years now, we have been collaborating with international parties on border management issues, and this work has a direct impact on how government agencies interact at the national level. Two of our key partners in this respect are the World Customs Organization and the World Health Organization. With the World Customs Organization, our collaboration has focused on a number of areas. For example, ICAO has aligned the cargo facilitation processes of Annex 9 with those of the revised Kyoto Convention. ICAO and the WCO have also jointly endorsed guidelines related to advanced passenger information and passenger name record data transfer. Our organizations as a chair common initiatives on cargo facilitation and security conference and publications, and we are also in the midst of aligning our respective provisions for the authorized economic operator and are planning to carry out a regulator agent pilot project. ICAO's collaboration with the WHO, as well as other UN agencies, has focused on the management of public health risks. In particular, we have aligned the health-related provisions of Annex 9 with the relevant articles in the WHO International Health Regulations. Our joint effort initially concentrated on preventing the spread of communicable disease, but has since expanded to other potential public health emergencies, such as those relating to chemical threats and bioterrorism. We also undertake joint missions on how to develop and improve national aviation plans for responding to public health emergencies. With respect to your session today and to the role of information technology in producing effective solutions for coordinated border management, my address would be incomplete if I omitted mention of one of ICAO's most successful collaborations with government authorities beyond the specific civil aviation context. I refer, of course, to our direct, productive, and long-standing cooperation with passport and other travel document issuers in developing technical specification for machine-readable passports, visas, and other official travel documents. Machine-readable travel documents, or MRTDs, are very much rooted in information technology and are becoming increasingly sophisticated. They are aimed at assuring the valid identity of travelers and contributing to security while facilitating passenger clearance at border points. Cooperation in the MRTD field has allowed ICAO to develop a close working relationship with the International Organization for Standardization. The ISO, as a matter of fact, separately endorses ICAO's MRTD specification as its own standards. Effective collaboration is also essential to the success of the ICAO Public Key Directory, PKD, an important cryptographic support system which allows its participants to securely validate e-passports in real time. Annex 9 calls on states to use information technology to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of border control procedures at airports. It is also mandatory for states to transmit advanced electronic documents for facilitating various border control processes. I have already mentioned API and PNR data transfer guidelines, but in addition, Annex 9 establishes a mandatory global regulatory system with regard to API. A proposal now before our member states would introduce the single window information exchange system into Annex 9. This innovative scheme would mirror an intrinsic component of the WCO coordinated border management concept. I very much look forward to continuing ICAO's collaborative ventures with the WCO in both the policy and implementation fields well into the future. Our common goal is to make border control management more efficient, more effective, and more sustainable for our member states and other stakeholders. In closing, the answer from ICAO's perspective to the question, integrated, collaborative, or coordinated border management, what's in a name, is this. Effective border management will result from authorities and stakeholders joining forces to achieve success. This is the key message I wish to leave with you today. Thank you again for this opportunity to set the tone for your discussions, and obviously I wish you a very productive conference.
Okay. Obviously, I think a very important message, and what I took from that most importantly, and I think it kind of is illustrated by the panel that we have assembled today, was the conclusion that Mr. Benjamin reached was effective border management will result from authorities and stakeholders joining forces to achieve success. I think that is critical, and I think that's a theme you're going to hear from this distinguished panel that I will now introduce. We have a combination of folks who have been working within government, within customs administrations, as well as, in one case, now in a different administration besides customs, and we have another representative besides Mr. Benjamin of the private sector. So in order to keep us on schedule and to allow more time for interaction, I'm not going to go in great depth in terms of the bios of the panelists. I'm just going to introduce them by name and title. Their complete bios are available on the WCO website, and I think it's important that you appreciate. They have many years of outstanding experience. To my immediate left, Mrs. Agnes Katsonga Piri, Commissioner of Customs and Excise from Malawi. To her left, Major General Carl Mode, Commissioner Customs Division of Commissioner Customs Division of Ghana Revenue Authority. Excuse me. And to his left, and this one is the interesting one, many of you know him from his time here at the WCO, Mr. Roger Smith, Deputy Director, Ministry for Primary Industries in New Zealand, and this is a new position to him. He has spent many years in Customs Administration of New Zealand. And to my right, Mr. Mohammed Sharaf, CEO, Group Chief Executive Office of DP World, one of the largest port operators in the world. So what we're attempting to talk about is the topic, as you say, it's raised in a question. Integrated, collaborative, or coordinated border management, what's in a name? And I think what we'll find from our discussion that it's not really critical what you call it, but it is important that we find some way of working cooperatively together. I'm going to just set the stage briefly with my background as indicated in the introduction. I served as Commissioner of the U.S. Customs Service back in the mid-90s, from 1993 to 1997. But I'm now just past an anniversary. I've been involved in customs and trade issues for 41 years, starting as a customs entry officer in 1972, and 25 years in government, ending as commissioner, and then 16 years as a private sector consultant trying to help companies cope with and deal with the regulatory requirements of moving goods abroad. I can tell you from the U.S. perspective, they are struggling. We have been struggling for a long period of time, and lots of changes have been made in the direction of trying to find this magical touch of greater coordination, cooperation, and integration. In the United States, the office, it's now called U.S. Customs and Border Protection. They just passed their 10-year anniversary. Were created in the aftermath of the terrible tragedy of 9/11. Back in my day, it was the U.S. Customs Service, an organization as part of the Treasury Department in the United States of roughly 20,000 people. The organization today is more than 60,000 people, and to deal with this challenge of coordination, they now not only have the Customs Authority, but immigration responsibility. So the former inspectors of the Immigration and Naturalization Service have come over. Inspectors from the Department of Agriculture have come over and now part of this same organization. And in addition to that, they have the Border Patrol, which was formerly in the Justice Department, to cover between the ports of entry. So it's an extremely large organization, and the objective clearly was to find better coordination, better information sharing. What was felt was that in the aftermath of 9/11, that there was not a good level of communication amongst and between agencies and the folks that were looking at immigration issues, folks that were coming across our borders illegally. There was not communication. So that was the objective of what they were attempting to resolve. I think significant progress has been made from that perspective, but there's still a lot more work to be done. And the last point I'd like to make before I turn it over to our next speaker, the challenge that I faced primarily as Commissioner of Customs was, before the 9/11 activity, was smuggling of illegal and narcotics, weapons, contraband, things of that nature. And what we found, particularly along our southwest border with Mexico, is that was a corridor of drug smuggling. The Office of National Drug Control Policy projected that 70% of the narcotics entering our country were crossing that border. It was a very difficult challenge to maintain our commercial responsibilities, to keep cargo flowing, and at the same time to make sure we were stopping drugs from coming into the country. And what we discovered, which I think is very relevant, and I'd like to, then I'll fast forward to the challenge of today, is that narcotic smugglers basically determined that one way to get drugs through customs was to infiltrate the supply chain. And in effect, we had something that we discovered after the fact, we called it an internal conspiracy. The drug smugglers would find a way to get drugs onto the vehicles, either maybe the paid-off people at the loading dock or the manufacturer facility, maybe the trucking company. Somewhere along the way, drugs would be put into that stream of commerce. And then the way that the process was supposed to work is that drugs would come off the train by other internal conspirators off the truck before it was delivered to the ultimate premises. So we found that was the case, and we found that was a terrible challenge that we had to face. And the point that I want to make from this is that we discovered then, and it's true even more today than before, we couldn't stop and examine every truck. That wouldn't make sense. What we did find is we had to work in cooperation with our stakeholders, the business community. And we launched an initiative in 1995 called, the acronym was BASC, the Business Anti-Smuggling Coalition, BASC. And under that arrangement, the private sector basically came to us, worked with us, and said, we want to do our part to ensure that our supply chain has not been corrupted. And they went through a number of steps, including looking at the facilities where goods are loaded, make sure that there's proper credentialing of the people who are on the loading dock, proper lighting, fencing, security, from the point of origin all the way through to ultimate destination. Well, fast forward to today, post 9/11, obviously it's a very serious problem when you find drugs on trucks or containers. But in the aftermath of 9/11, the fear, and one of the reasons that Customs and Border Protection is now part of a new department, Department of Homeland Security, is the sense that if these weren't drugs, but a dirty bomb or some sort of weaponry that could be detonated at some point, you would have tremendous devastation, not only loss of life, but tremendous disruption into the global supply chain. So that was the origin of what became, the anti-smuggling coalition. That's the CTPAT, Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism. Globally, we've worked with the WCO, and we have the AEO program, the SAFE guidelines. So that's kind of just a flavoring of what's going on in the United States and moving towards this direction of trying to have greater integration. Things have improved, but we're a long way from being where we need to be. One of the basic things that I think will come out in our panelist discussion is that you need to have the information flow, and you need to have it quick so that Customs can do their so-called risk analysis, but you have to be appreciative of the burdens that we cause to the trading community when we have multiple requests for information and data in multiple forms. In 1993, when I was commissioner, we began the quest for a single window. In our case, we call it the International Trade Data System, ITDS. It is now 20 years later, and we are nowhere near delivering on that promise. And we can get into in the question and answer what some of the obstacles were to achieving that, but it's a problem. We need to do more. We need to work together. We need to find solutions, and that's one of the challenges that we're going to be talking about on our panel today. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to my first speaker, which is Agnes. Take on.
Thank you. The Secretary General of the WCO, all distinguished delegates, and the organizers of this conference, all protocols observed. I feel very privileged to be part of this panelist. If I was sitting here 2 years ago, I would be telling you something that I've read in the books, other people's research. But what I want to talk about is something very practical, something that I've done. And thanks to the USAID Trade Hub that took me to all the key borders on the various corridors in Southern Africa. And I spent days there, having read some reports by the World Bank of the bottlenecks on the frontier. The topic that we are gathered here for is integrated, collaborative, or coordinated border management, the famous CBM, a new concept. What is it that is in the name? Already the name coordinated, it gives an indication of multiple players, that there are several players at the borders now. I think the traditional border, we all know, you'd only think about immigration and customs and police. But currently, I think everybody that wants to implement their mandate, everybody is moving to the border. And I think you saw the presentation also, even by Dubai, the number of agencies that they're working with. We're talking of the range from 2 agencies, which I think the New Zealand told me that at their borders, there are only 2 agencies, to about 14 to 15 agencies operating at the border. What does it mean? Several multiple players at the border with their own mandates, multiple procedures which they want to implement, and everybody is focusing on the goods. The question is, who is in control at the border? These multiple agencies, are they talking to each other? Do they know each other's mandate? Who, how, and what is supposed to happen to link up these people? That's why we're gathered here this afternoon, and in Dubai in particular. And that's why we have all those exhibitors outside in the various cubicles as a solution to say, how do we link up these people? Now, who is the victim in this chaotic border? Because this is a clear bottleneck at the border. The victim, one, is the trader, because he has to bear that cost, which we eventually pass it on. But why is the trader a victim? Loss of business. There's so much competition out there. If they don't meet the deadline, they lose the business. So the trader becomes a victim by closing the shop because of several agencies' inefficiency at the border. The public is a victim. You are the consumer, you bear the cost. The government may not realize they are victims, because if people can't afford, eventually, they'll just strike. There'll be chaos in the country. Investors will not come. So we are all victims. That means we all have to join hands to say we have to do something. Having all that chaos, WCO, as the father of all the customs administrations, is in the driving seat at the global level, driving all the customs administrations to reform and modernize. I think you've heard from the various speakers and presentations, the various instruments that the WCO has in place. Nobody has to invent the wheel, but it's a matter of implementing the instruments and benchmarking with the other administrations. Even the Secretary General talked about the clear pillars, the customs to customs pillar, customs to the stakeholders, that is the business pillars. And I will repeat his slogan, borders divide, customs connects. How does customs connect? That's why we're here to discuss. The whole basis of all this debate is trade facilitation. What does the business want? Simplicity, predictability, uniformity to level the playing field. They're looking for the trust. We shouldn't always treat them as suspicious, as corrupt. The business are saying, why don't you isolate us? Boys from the men, or girls from the ladies, the women? That's profiling. They're looking for transparency, fast service. We need to reduce the release time. The business is looking for information. However, all those agencies working at the border, they need the information for them to implement the mandate they want to implement. So we have a clear border which is so complex. Now the complexity at the border is not just about implementing the mandate. Whether you like it or not, now that introduces several layers of corruption. You have to bribe this agent, this agent, this agent to have something done. That's a serious challenge. Now, the question is, how do we move forward? That's when we have the issues of coordination of these border agencies. Coordinated border management. You need a structure at the border to coordinate these agencies at the border. How do they talk to each other? There's need to link to share the information. There's need at the border level for a clear chain of clearance so that whoever gets there, they know where to start and where to end and who plays what role. There's need for coordinated inspections. But at the same spot, when you analyze the border agencies, due to the drive by the WCO, Customs is well ahead, well advanced. It has automated. It's coming up with all these non-intrusive equipment, the scanners. Now we have to find a way of sharing those images because Customs will have the images electronically. Then you have these other agencies. They still want to physically open everything and look at it. So we are saying as a way forward, let's look at IT as a link, IT as a solution. And that's why we have all those cubicles outside. They are demonstrating how it works. Customs has gone way ahead in doing remote filing. Customs is now processing declarations in HQs. From the various centers, they're just filing remotely. Now, we're saying the other agencies, why not go back to your HQs? You can view the frontier from HQ. You can make rulings online. You can upload the licenses, certificates online. You can access the scanned images online. All the other agencies, they need to automate if we have to really make progress. All these other concepts we're talking about, one-stop border post, if we don't have a coordinated platform at the border, the national single window will just be part of the chaos at the border. It won't be as effective. So we need a structure at the border, coordinated border management. We need a structure at HQ level to make decisions to guide the borders. As everybody is singing the OSB, one-stop border post, national single window, the partnership, those two pillars, they remain key. Customs to customs, I think MOUs have been signed, but it's time to be practical. Link, connect electronically to operationalize the MOUs. Then MOUs with the business, they need to be linked as well so that we share the information. When we talk of risk management, profiling, now it has to go beyond customs because even all these other agencies, they need to now learn to do business in a different way. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the challenge we have before us. And I think I also like the Dubai presentation when they talked about the various levels, national, regional, and global. World Customs Organization is driving all this modernization, all these instruments they've come up with at a global level. There are all these regional blocks that are also driving the modernization. But meaningful and effective coordination and making the world really one big market is the initiatives that will be done at the national level. So it is very important that connectivity and linking through technology between the various agencies, that will be very, very meaningful and it's going to be effective and add value. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll end here.
Thank you very much, Agnes. That was very enlightening, and I think you're absolutely right. I think technology is the key to the solution, but there's a lot of ways to get from here to there, and we need to be talking about that some more. Carl, can you please share with us your experiences in Ghana in tackling this issue of consolidated, coordinated, integrated border management, and what sort of obstacles you faced, and what sort of recommendations you might have, and what lessons learned you may have had?
Thank you very much. Secretary General, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Ghana would like to thank the organizers and Dubai Customs for their wonderful reception and hospitality. We are grateful. I will veer slightly and focus on the critical issue of why is it not possible for all of us to pursue this collaborated, integrated concept. From the facilitator's point, the background relates to post 9/11, when a number of advanced countries brought out this customs and border security concept. We have come a long way. Today, what is the threat that we face? Yes, cross-boundary terrorism is still there, and therefore it's necessary. Terrorism has no defined boundaries, but there are other equal threats that we face, particularly in Africa and West Africa. Drugs. UNODC will tell you the quantum of drugs that come from South America, transiting through West Africa into various places. Counterfeit commodities, money laundering, and therefore, even though we all agree that the critical benefits of coordinated border management relates to optimal revenue mobilization, investment promotion, trade facilitation, and about regional integration, as well as that human security aspect of protecting the society. Who is responsible? There are various agencies, as our colleagues have said, as Dubai Customs have said. I'm not going to belabor the processes, the concepts, and all that, but just to emphasize on how we should be able to determine who should do it, how, and with what authority. As we all know, Customs, I think, is the best placed organization to play the lead agency. But then, other agencies have their mandates. They have different report lines. There are no regulatory frameworks deciding on who should be the lead agency. Customs has the mandate in most countries, revenue targets that commissioners or director generals are said becomes their priority. We have currently precursor chemicals which can be turned into improvised explosive devices. Should they occur anywhere, it's a major problem. Who should be able to coordinate the activities that will lead to the detection and seizure of something like that? If you put in a lot of effort to be able to coordinate activities of all other agencies, Narcotics Control Board, Immigration, the Police, National Security, with Customs as the lead. Everybody should recognize the dividend of such a measure, the safety aspect, as opposed to revenue. So the delicate balance between security and revenue becomes an issue. What is the way forward? I think that governments must have the political will to have the legislation dictating who should be the lead agency in coordinating the border activities. If there is no legislation, in our country, we have formed a joint Customs Consultative Committee, which has all the stakeholders in the maritime industry. You will meet, you will agree that this is the way to go. Thereafter, if they do not follow the processes and the procedures or the agreements that you have laid out, there will be no cooperation, there will be no integration, because they have their mandates and different reporting lines. So if the political will is there, the legislation is there, everybody like the US, the UK, and New Zealand and others have set up these customs and border security organizations. The structure should be clearly defined, their roles should be defined, the lead agencies. What is the point if an immigration officer decides that he's only interested in where the person comes from and he does not tell the customs officer who is looking at what consignment he brings in? If the two of them should sit together jointly, he will know that, yes, he traveled from here, transited here, came here. This is the number of times he has traveled. This is what he has brought, and that within the risk management system, we can be able to say that, well, this is a high-profile consignment. These are some of the issues. So if you are not able to get a legislation that will put everybody together and decide who is in charge, everybody would like to go his own way. Additionally, let me just reflect my notes. It's been very difficult to convince most governments to agree on some of these issues because there's a different ministry in charge of different aspects of trade, of finance, and the major players within this coordinated body all fall under the various ministries. It is critical for somebody to be able to coordinate and say that this person is in charge of this. Scanners, some different organizations may purchase scanners for customs organizations. That is a problem in the first place. There's no coordination in that aspect. And therefore, the point I'm trying to make is that there must be legislation, there must be the political will, there must be the direction to indicate that, yes, we want a coordinated border management concept. It works, these are the advantages, but these are the procedures, these are the structures, this is how we can be able to implement it effectively so that the benefits can be seen. Once a customs commissioner is not able to make his target for the year, for instance, if he lays emphasis on other aspects of border security relating to human security or anything else, I'm sure he might lose his job. And therefore, it is important that these things are well streamlined. Everybody understands the benefits that will inure to the public at large. And at the same time, mobilize additional revenue, because with all the customs procedures well automated, which has already laid down procedures, other agencies can easily fit in. And then I will appeal that the service providers here should be able to get us simplified systems of sharing information, timely sharing information that will enhance risk management, that will enhance the compliance, and that will enhance revenue mobilization. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carl, and I think you made some excellent points there that are probably applicable to almost all of us in our respective countries. You know, back in the mid-90s when I was commissioner, we had a phrase that U.S. Customs was responsible for enforcing over 400 laws from 40 different government agencies in the United States. I've heard recently that, I guess it's inflation, they're now saying more than 600 laws from 60 different agencies, and it's often unclear. You know, many of the agencies are right there at the border, agriculture and immigration, but many of these others are not at the border, but they look at the Customs Administration to be the eyes and ears, the conduit of getting the information they feel they need to enforce all of their many programs. But as we struggle to try to get this single window concept, many agencies have not come to an agreement or any direction from their government, by statute or otherwise, that we ought to look at this challenge of what information is really critical at the point of releasing goods into the commerce, not what information may be necessary as part of an enforcement process later down the road. But I think if we could get all of our countries forcing, all of our government, individual countries, looking at the issue, how do we facilitate a single data input from the business community, we'd get more data, better data, we'd get it sooner, and it could be shared across government agencies. But our experience in the United States is each individual agency is looking at it from their own responsibilities and their own mandate and not looking to kind of compromise. I think the WCO has done an outstanding job in terms of the data model and the data set of what, trying to help appreciate what specific elements are really those critical elements that governments through customs should really require, and then have more information can be provided later as necessary by the respective and individual agency. That just kind of a thought tonight that prompted, Carl, your comments prompted that thought from me. Now turning, as I said earlier, Roger comes from a very unique position. He now is responsible for primary industries. He's not with the Customs Administration. He's one of those other agencies that Customs in New Zealand has to work with. So it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on these challenges that you're facing in New Zealand.
Thank you, George, and my respects to the Secretary General and to our gracious host today. Look, since this is an IT conference, I'm not going to talk about IT at all. I think there's a couple of hundred people out there that are experts in IT solutions. I actually want to talk about something different. I want to talk about some comments that Philippe Amon from SICPA mentioned this morning, because he said something that stimulated my thought process about why we're all here. And before I get onto that, I just will note that, yes, in biosecurity for New Zealand, we're a country that's reliant upon agriculture for exports. So biosecurity is our top border security issue. And in fact, our biosecurity at the border is around the same size as our customs. So we have around 1,200 customs people working at the border. We also have around 1,200 biosecurity officials. So it's a slightly unique situation, but sort of two agencies of similar size. So going back to Philippe Amon's comments, he said about the importance of trust between business and government, and we hear that all the time. And then he went on to quote a quote that said, "Trust opens up unlimited opportunities." Well, while I totally agree with the statement, I think when he's talking about trust between business and government, first of all, we have to look at trust at home. We need to look at trust between our respective government agencies. We need to work on how we, as different agencies at the border, can trust each other. And while IT solutions will help, in the end it will only be through the agencies working together and building some trust. So if I look at the New Zealand example, we've had a coordinated border relationship for maybe 20 years. We've worked closely, both customs when I was in customs, and now when I work in biosecurity. But we're not a collaborative border. We do not work collaboratively together. And if we look at the question, I think, in fact, Dubai Customs answered it perfectly for us before when they gave us the 4 Cs. There's a big difference between coordination and collaboration. And so for our country, we decided that we need to have a collaborative border over 5 years ago, and it's actually taken 5 years of serious debate, ministerial intervention, numerous white papers for the New Zealand government to give us a direction on how we will collaborate at the border, and that's mainly between biosecurity, customs, and immigration. And noting how hard that program is, they've also said they'll give us another 5 years to build a collaborative border. Now, this is for a country that has we're launching our trade single window, a new trade single window literally next month. We've worked together cooperatively at the border for 20 years, and yet the government has still said it's a 10-year process for us to build a truly collaborative border. And how do we have to do that? The one thing that we've been told to do, it's around conversations. We need to start opening real conversations up between, I said, at home, domestically, between commissioners of customs and commissioners of police and commissioners of revenue and commissioners of biosecurity. We need to have those discussions. We need to have those discussions at ministerial level back in our countries, but also we need to have them ground up. In New Zealand, we've found the most effective way to build a collaborative border is frontline officials working together, understanding that we are all border management professionals, and that while one issue may be higher importance today than the other, in the end, We are border management professionals, and we're trying to lose the language of customs or biosecurity or quarantine. We're trying to learn the language that we are border management professionals. And this is where I put the challenge out to Secretary General and to the WCO. It's very easy to have great conversations in the WCO, and I spent 5 years having those conversations. And we all go home enthused, and we talk to our national governments about how important customs are at the border, how important it is to have a collaborative border. But if you don't have the other agencies that work at the border in those same conversations at the front end in Brussels, you will never get that conversation getting traction back on your home countries. Because I watch enthusiastic customs commissioners come home and tell the other commissioners how important customs is and how this is the focus and this is where national security begins. And the other commissioners go, well, I wasn't there. I don't know what you're talking about. So for me, the challenge is, how do we start those conversations? How do we start building trust, not between government and business? We'll work on that, but how do we build trust within government so that we can work with each other, share data, and cooperate? Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. And I think that is an outstanding challenge for the WCO, because the WCO does do a fabulous job with customs representatives from all over the world. But each time the individual goes home, they deal with multiple agencies, and we need to find a mechanism to have that communication that broadens the dialogue amongst all agencies. But before turning to Mohammed now to get some of the private sector input, I would really like you to be thinking about, because after Mohammed speaks, I would like to encourage audience participation, any experiences that any of you would like to share in terms of success stories on how this coordinated border management has worked effectively for you. Obviously, any questions to the panelists or any obstacles that you've had to overcome and you've learned something from it would be helpful for us. But now turning to Mohammed, obviously, no stakeholder is more critical in the overall process than the operators of the port. He's right in the middle between working with the governments and the government regulatory responsibilities and his many customers and shippers that are trying to avail themselves of moving goods as quickly as possible. It would be interesting to hear your perspectives on this discussion, Mohammed.
Thank you, sir. Before I start, one thing is very important for us, that everybody realizes that we consider customs as our partners, whether it's here in Dubai or anywhere in the world. Today we are operating in 30 countries around the world. We handle over 56 million containers annually. I'll just give you some statistics to give you the perspective where we're coming from as a trade. In 2010, the global container trade was about 550 million TEUs. In 2011, that increased to 594 million TEUs. In 2012, that went up by about 4%, which was very low, to 600 million TEUs. Our estimates are that by year 2020, the container trade will increase to about 1 billion TEUs globally. What does it tell us? It tells us the trade is growing, the borders are vanishing, more and more trade is happening between countries, and it's going to be growing. In addition to that, it tells us that responsibilities on customs and other agencies within the countries are increasing. I heard my colleagues here talking about security and revenue part. This is where we find in some countries that we operate, we find that the countries focus more on revenue rather than the security of the country. This is where we come in and we say that there is a technology with increasing trade, manually inspecting the cargo, whether the data is becoming more and more impossible or difficult. I would not say it's impossible, but it's too time consuming, it's too difficult. Unless we use the technology, and we have seen, we heard Jum Al-Ghaith here from Dubai Customs, he was talking about some experiences that we have faced here in Dubai. What are we doing here? Our base is in Dubai, and we started our business here in Dubai. We worked very closely with Customs without compromising the security part of it, and without compromising the revenue part of the business. I don't think anybody can stand up here and say that we will be successful by inspecting goods 100% and we're going to be secured and safe in our countries. We have countries where we operate, we see the containers and the cargo are 100% inspected physically, and yet we see drugs in that country, yet we see weapons in that country, we see crime in that country. It's still going on. Is that doing what the custom agencies want to do. We don't believe that. We believe that by working together as an operator with the custom authorities, it will improve the trade, increase it, and facilitate the trade network globally. Jamal also talked about his idea of local border to regional border and global border. And this is where you need to have a standard set of data. And surprise, there is a standard data. The manifest in the industry, it's there. In 1994, when we started with Dubai Custom, our effort to put all those data electronically in what Dubai Custom calls today Mirsal, e-Mirsal, we call it EMDS. We went around the world to find out where there is a common standard IT solution to this. We couldn't find that. So the only solution was the manifest. 90% of the global trade is in the sea. You have a vessel manifest and you have an aircraft manifest. It's all there. All we need to be sure that all those information are correct and we can exchange among customs. We are not seeing that. We are seeing in many countries, they have their own requirement and different requirement, which in some cases slows down the trade process. We go to countries where the officials, they ask us, they say, we want you to build the best port in the world. We can build the best port in the world, but if you cannot facilitate the trade, the port is no good anymore. Why? Because the cargoes are not moving. We have countries where the cargoes sit inside the port for 2 months. The reason is the process, clearance of the goods. It's good money for the port, but it is negative impact on the trade of the country. Whether we like it or not, this is the real reason that when you slow down the trade, it impacts your trade. And many countries complain usually that why the trade is not increasing or improving in our country. We look at it very simplistically. We say that if we move a container and we can save $1 to the importer or the exporter of that country, that $1 is in the pocket of the economy, which means that the economy is going to be spending $1 more locally, which means that they can trade more. In simple word. So the solution we see, IT is, I think it's an integral part of the solution. Without IT in today's world, the growth that we are seeing, it is going to be close to impossible. And we are seeing in many, many countries, especially you go to Africa, South America, we are seeing more and more countries adapting to the IT. Yet, we are still seeing, while the IT is there, we are seeing slowdown is still there. The old traditional way of clearing the goods are still there. That needs to be taken away. We see, again, the fight between the revenue and security, where we see that customs officials are focusing on the revenue. You can guarantee, you can bet on it that security is being left aside. Why? Because people are looking at the revenue side and forgetting about what's going in. That has to be streamlined. We have to streamline that and say, yes, security is paramount importance. Then, as far as the revenue is concerned, let the IT do the work. Dubai Custom was talking about today, again, the risk assessment, the smart inspection, which they are doing it, and it's successful. I'm not saying that you're going to be covering or protecting 100%, but at least we can start from somewhere and go forward, which will also impact on our business. We will be able to smoothly turn around the goods and the vessels. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mohammed. I think a couple of points you made there really resonate with me. I think in particular, the first point you made about the volume of increasing trade. And I think those of us that have been involved in this for a long period of time, I think there's clear consensus that we all know we have to move in this direction. But I don't think there is the sense of urgency that really needs to be there to get us there much more quickly. And I think that's the thing we need to be struggling with, and perhaps we can discuss going forward. How do we find these solutions? And I think that the IT is the key, and I think IT uniformity, setting kind of standards that would have not different IT systems in every country around the world, but find some standards that are uniform so that you don't have repetitive multiple requests for data, repetitive multiple types of IT mechanisms. We've got our challenge ahead of us, and I think there is a great sense of urgency with the sheer volume of trade that's growing the security threats and the issues that are there. And I think, as Mohammed pointed out, it doesn't have to be either or. If you get the right systems in place, you're going to get more effective enforcement, more effective revenue collection, all the things that Customs looks for, but you're going to get it in a much more efficient and effective way, and the business community doesn't get stopped for 30 days, 60 days at various ports of entry. Excellent point. So at this point, again, I would like to very much encourage, we'd like to hear from you, the audience. If you have any questions for any of the speakers on points they've made thus far, if you'd like to share any specific experiences or successes that you've had with the rest of the group, we'd encourage you to come to the mics. There's some microphones apparently in the aisles. Does anybody like to participate in this discussion with us? Anybody? Okay, we have a question up here in the front. A mic is coming your way so that we can hear what you're.
Thank you, Mr. Facilitator. My name is Bello Liman from Nigeria Customs. I want to comment on the remark by Mr. Mohammed in respect of, in spite of the 100% examination of cargo that takes place in many countries, we still see proliferation of small arms, of drugs, and this is also in addition to the technology that is being deployed at both the destination and at the point of export. Where is the failure? I know that in many countries, especially in Africa, we have hundreds of thousands of border guards manning the various entry and exit points of various nations. Is it the failure of the guards at the point of destination or the failure of the customs at the point of export? In many instances, I have seen that emphasis has been on import, import, import. Goods become import at countries of at destination points, and they are export at the point from which they leave. What is the role of the various agencies that we are talking about in relation to goods that are being exported from such countries, so that we do not continue to see these challenges at the point of import? Thank you very much.
It's a very relevant and good question. Who's responsible to start with? And what we have as, again, this is something that we don't have visibility on what's inside the container as the terminal operator. But we come to know when it stopped, when they ask for the inspection, and when it's inspected and they say put it aside, and it sits aside. What we have presented and asked that each single container, again, this is technology, IT, should be scanned. And by scanning, you give the custom authority the visibility of what's inside the box before even opening it. And you have experts in customs, I believe, they can look and identify whether there are goods which are prohibited in this country or not. And then you can put those boxes aside and take it to the X-ray or physical inspection. That will save everybody the time. That's one way of doing it. But what we have seen is, in many countries, we see the governments welcome the idea, but then what happens is that they say, we'll put the scan, we'll manage the scan, but when the scan is down, you have to wait. Now, I have a ship waiting out there with 2,000 or maybe 10,000 containers, and my yard is full. What do I do? So these are the issues that we are facing, and I think what my colleague here said, that this is where I think, if I may use the word of corruption, starts. An inspection, when you inspect goods physically 100%, we believe you're opening the door to corruption. And this is where the government loses, individuals gain. This is what it, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but there is a solution. The solution is to use the technology, because the trade is increasing. Whether it's in Africa or in this part of the world or in Europe, same thing, the trade is increasing, and the way it is increasing today and what we anticipate and forecast, it will be physically impossible to continue to grow the trade and physically inspect everything. It will be impossible. That's why we have the technology, and every day technology is improving, which can give you better information. Now, even with the data that we are receiving, if you analyze and smartly, the systems are all there today, that if you have a risk assessment and smart analysis of your data, you will be able to find out what's allowed and at what rate or not. But I can also guarantee you that you will not be able to stop 100% of unwanted goods coming in. That will be almost impossible. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Any other comments on this? Yep.
We have the reality whereby somebody is exporting a product, then the customs will do the process, then you find agriculture, say this product, we need a fumigation certificate. Then they say you need an export license. Then you also need an import license in the other country. We came across somebody at the border who was so stranded there. He had the export license from Zambia. Now his country in Kenya said we can't issue the import license, bring a sample. But that is simple. Somebody from customs could have just gone, or agriculture, get a picture of that, upload in the system and forward it. But the guy was stuck at the border. And eventually what he said was, you know what, I've just told the guys to take off with the bicycle. They were carrying the maize across from Zambia to Tanzania side. And they were loading the trucks to just move. So here's somebody who wanted to follow the procedure. But by the end of the day, nobody was making a decision at the border. It was a non-starter. Customs say, we are done with it. Agriculture says, we need this documentation. So you reach a point where people are in trade, they just don't know what to do. So we need to find a solution to these things. And the technology is making it easy. You can upload a document, a picture, you forward it. And you can exchange the image from the scanning. Thank you.
If I may add to this, and one solution when we gave to one of the customs authorities, we said, okay, you can stop these goods, but then put it in your own yard. Guess what's the answer? No. You see?
Indeed. Other questions or comments from the audience? Because the one point I would like to just follow up on is a point Mohammed made and the representative from Dubai Customs earlier about conceptually making the export transaction in effect be the import documents and that sort of continuity. And you made the point about the manifest is really the vehicle that we could use to process this if we get the information right. And I think that's one of the challenges that we collectively faced. I think historically and traditionally, most customs administrations very carefully scrutinize imports because of the revenue collection responsibilities, et cetera. But when it comes to on exports, unless it's a particularly restricted good that requires some sort of licensing, the export documentation is not quite so well scrutinized by the people preparing the documents. And the point you made, Mohammed, which I think is an accurate one, if we could find a way to ensure we get that information right on the manifest, that it isn't some shipping clerk saying, I've got to put something down here, so I'll just put a name down, but someone knowledgeable, knowing what the goods are, able to describe them in a way that the customs official would be able to accept it, properly classify it. That is really the potential solution to this problem. But how do we focus on getting that information right? Because I think you'll recognize the manifest information often is not right.
I don't want to be, again, bragging about this in Dubai, but in Dubai, this is exactly what Dubai Customs has done, I think. They are here, they can make comments on it, but they have trained, and I know it because we are here, that they train the freight forwarders, the shipping agents, how to fill in the documents, how to fill in the electronic documents, what kind of codes they're to be used, and the UN codes that we have, 16,000 UN codes for the cargo. They train them here on regular basis so that when it reaches the final destination, it's not Dubai's name that, okay, Dubai has misdeclared the cargo. Because we get many of that here. You see? But what we want is that when it reaches the final destination as an export from Dubai and import to that country, the information is accurate. What's inside the container is in the paper.
Any other questions or comments from the audience?
Well, a question which could be raised, in fact, in terms of CBR and chemical, biological, and radiological, in fact, is there any initiative or any step might be taken by the WCO, because, most of borders and airports all over the world, they still haven't achieved, CBRN, in fact, units.
Roger, you
Any question is to WCO. Is there any initiative that WCO is taking?
right. We don't have a WCO panelist. That's why I looked to Roger as a former WCO representative.
The Secretary General's right there. I'm sure he's...
All right.
Did you hear the question?
It was not very clear, but it's talking about the role.
Good question.
Well, thank you very much. So the question is about chemical, biological, those kind of goods. And what we are doing is that this is the strategic trade. And we have organized, well, first of all, 2 years ago, we have launched the Global Seed Program, which is about monitoring precursor chemicals, which could be diverted from the supply chain to produce improvised explosive devices. So this was the first step. And then we have enlarged last year that all those chemical, biological, or nuclear goods which could be danger or risks to supply chain, we organized that conference, how best we can tackle this issue. And now we are preparing to launch other programs to address this issue with more administrations, and in that way raise awareness, but also how best we can enhance collaboration with the customs administrations, but also the producers of those goods, because it is very important that some goods are really dual-use goods, so to speak, therefore it is a legitimate trade. But we have to enhance our collaboration with those producers or legitimate traders to make sure that those goods are within the legitimate supply chain and not to be diverted for another risky use. So this is the program that we have started and will be expanded in the future.
Thank you. Roger?
George, I just wanted to make a comment on the long-term focus of using an export entry for an import entry. And obviously, for years and years we've discussed, and it might be a step too far at the moment, but interesting enough, when I moved into the phytosanitary world, that is what we do. And so when you're dealing in phytosanitary products, the exporting country's competent authority certifies the goods as being acceptable into the importing country, and the importing country accepts that certification as being the final certification. So interesting enough, we talked about this for years in the customs environment, and I moved into the phytosanitary world, and it was there. And it's under government treaty, it's under the WTO, and so actually the exporting country's documentation is used as the importing country's clearance documentation. So there is a model there that works. It's a model that's signed off in the WTO, and every member of the WTO works to that system. And so thousands of shipments every day come into my country that we don't look at because they've been certified by the exporting country. That's the system. It works in phytosanitary, so I don't know why, when you look longer term, that system can't be replicated within the customs world.
Right. Excellent. While we're nearing the end of our allotted time, I've been told that we can go a few extra minutes since we started a bit late. So are there any other questions or comments? One in the back?
Yes, I'm Didi Manarang. I'm the chair of the ASEAN Single Window Steering Committee. I would just want to share that in the ASEAN, the concept of the ASEAN Single Window is to transfer the responsibility from the importing or from the importer to the exporter, because we believe that it is the exporter or the exporting country who can vouch for the goods manufactured, goods packed, declared, and shipped to the exporting country. So the declaration that's done by the exporting country would be the one that will be how they, that, which will be the one that will be accepted by the importer or the importing country. So I would like to believe that this is helping in the assurance or making sure that the goods that are being shipped and the goods that are being declared are the correct or the correct goods that are being shipped to the importer. Because the problem seems to be how do we know or who should vouch for the authenticity of the declarations made? And we believe that the exporter should be able, or the exporting country should know more about the authenticity of the goods being declared than the receiving country.
Excellent, thank you. Agnes?
Just to comment on that, when we talk, I think, about the coordinated border management, when we talk about authenticity of the goods, normally it would be maybe the customs area of operation. But this coordination now, it comes in when these other border agencies also want to say, we need to look at the goods as well. Then you have several of them, they're checking exactly the same things. But they're not talking to each other. They don't even know what the other ministry is checking. They have no idea. And they don't even share the information among themselves. Then what becomes a challenge as well is the people that are put at the border, they do not have the authority to issue any documentation. They're just like a robot. They're just checking. So either you have a document, a certificate or not. If you have it, they say, sorry, I can't allow you to go. If you have it, they will allow you to go. But then if you say, okay, I'm ready to pay, what is it I'm supposed to do? They don't even facilitate you. The question is, what are they doing at the border? So that is quite tricky. So you have all these agencies, they're lined up there, enforcing whatever they're supposed to do. He talked about the training of the clearing and forwarding agents. We also do training. So you find that, I think in the place of the IT, the clearing and forwarding agent is the manual IT, running from agent to the other agent. They're the ones that know which agents was what. But the rest of them don't know, they don't talk to each other, they don't know what the other one is looking for. So this is something which is very practical, it's on the ground, and it's a challenge to people that are transiting the border. The airports are straightforward, but the borders is a real problem. So I think this issue of coordination is a very serious one. And that's why the pillars of the WCO, customs stakeholder, I think we need to take it upon ourselves. I think WCO has developed all these instruments. You heard from the Secretary General, the initiatives that they are making. And they've offered where we need support from them, they give all the guidelines. And that's why I said, if you have to make something very effective, something meaningful, it's a national level customs to drive these partnerships in collaboration with the ministries. So it is very important that the ministries are really engaged to do something to make a difference. And that is why I also talked about a structure, a coordinated border set up at the border itself, but also at HQ level. That the HQ Customs Revenue Authority should be talking to the HQs of all these other border agencies. Otherwise, we'll keep talking and nothing will happen. By the end of the day, it's the trader that is really suffering. By the end of the day, we are all paying for the cost of the delays. And investors will shy that country away and go elsewhere. So we really need to look at the solutions and how should we handle this. It's a serious problem on the ground.
Question over there.
خليفة السيابي مدير الشؤون الجمركية جمارك سلطنة عمان. أعتقد بالنسبة للتنظيم العمل في المنافذ الحدودية يتطلب إجراء منظم مثل بوليصة الشحن المعمول فيها في المنافذ البحرية والمنافذ الجوية. دور منظمة الجمارك العالمية يجب وضع أسس تساعد وتسهل العمل في المنافذ الحدودية. الحاصل الحين في المنافذ الحدودية في مختلف دول العالم العمل فيها اجتهادي، ما في قواعد أسست هذا العمل، سواء كان عمل تقني تكنولوجي أو عمل يدوي. فيفترض أن المنظمة الجمارك العالمية تتبنى إجراء موحد وتبدأ تنشر هذا العمل لجميع الدول، عقد ورش لتسهيل هذا العمل بدون يكون إجراء منظم في جميع المنافذ البرية. لن يكون هناك عمل موحد. أنا أقترح أن يكون هناك في بوليصة شحن بري توضح فيها تفاصيل البضاعة مثل ما هو معمول فيه في المنافذ البحرية والمنافذ الجوية. ربما تكون هذه خطوة لتنظيم العمل في منافذ الحدود. شكرا.
Anybody get that full question? Want to respond? But we were just discussing that perhaps that, again, is an issue that comes back to the WCO in many respects in terms of setting standards, but only, remember, the WCO sets standards, but they have to be implemented by countries around the world. It's sort of advisory. So I think your question maybe didn't relate specifically to this, but it's one of the challenges of the solution we talked about is having the export declaration manifest, facilitate what you use on imports, and the question is who's really responsible for the accuracy of that. And that's one of the challenges we faced as customs administrations, that we basically have jurisdiction, authorization over the importer, but not the person that's shipping the goods from outside of the United States. So if it's an inaccurate document in its point of origin, it's the importer who potentially is liable from the government that's importing the country. So that's another challenge that we would have to face going forward, is ensuring that that information is not only accurate, but that importers can rely on it, as accurate information and not be held to some sort of standard of fraud by having an incorrect statement and that sort of thing. So I think that would be an issue that would need to be addressed as well.
I think إذا أنا مو غلطان اقتراحك كان إن بيكون عندنا بوليصة شحن بري موحد عالمي، صح؟ I think what he's recommending that there should be a land transport manifest, basically, which I think there is already there. They call it land transportation bill, and I think it's taken care by TIL, the organization International Transportation. They have it already, but unfortunately, in this part of the world, in GCC, we have not seen that implemented yet. And I support your initiative because here we have been struggling on this. There's no transportation bill of lading or manifest per se. It's just customs bill that we take and we cross the borders here. And many countries in the Middle East, you'll find that it's not there. I may be wrong, but we've been facing here in Dubai for a long time that we've been trying to have a standard bill for land transportation.
Excellent. Okay. I think we probably have time for maybe one more question. I understand there's a question over on this side of the room. Let's go ahead.
Good afternoon. I have been 10 years...
Please stand so we can see.
Okay. Rudy Himmler from Luxembourg. I have been 10 years as CIO and CTO of Cargolux Airlines, and since 3 years working and coordinating the single window project in Luxembourg. We are at this moment building a goods declaration message, a very standardized goods declaration message, which has to be the same for airlines, for railroads, and for trucks, and which should be compliant with the WCO data model. We have a very good experience with that way going. Our surprise is a little bit that many people around the world are working on the single window, but at this moment we do not really find a mapping, for instance, between the IATA e-freight messages, the FFM message, and the WCO data messages. So I think there is an opportunity for the 10 of us here who are going to attend this meeting today and the meeting in Geneva on e-freight to sit together and just do the job and create the right mapping for these messages. But I feel that we are all talking about it, but not really sitting together and just doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's an outstanding point, and I think it's an excellent comment, not a question to end on. And I think that we all should be inspired to come from this discussion today, that there is a challenge ahead of us, that there is a great sense of urgency to resolve this challenge because of the tremendous growth in trade, as well as the challenges of securing trade. And it takes a question of willpower, of finding solutions to problems as opposed to continuing to talk about how difficult the problem is. So I think that's an excellent point to end our discussion. I thank you all very much for your active participation. I thank the panelists for your great presentations. I can repeat once again, it's been a real honor to share the stage with such distinguished individuals. Thank you all, and now I guess we can move on to the reception. Thank you. Oh no, we have sorry, Suzanne will be making some announcements.
Thank you, George. You're not escaping that quickly. Thank you very much to the roundtable speakers. I think we got a lot of food for thought. It's interesting to see also that everywhere people struggle with the same things. For example, liability or for the data was also one of the issues discussed when we spoke about globally networked customs to customs exchanges. Because we always said the quality of data will be better because there is no possibility or reduced possibility to introduce additional errors by typing in data if customs exchanges data with customs or other government agencies. But of course the question is, who is liable for the data initially, and if the initial data is not correct, that would again be a major problem. Maybe to reply quickly to the colleague from Luxembourg, we are cooperating with IATA, and as far as I know, in particular on the e-freight, there is an ongoing mapping exercise happening, and I do think that next week or the week after, one of our colleagues dealing with the data model and single window, Espisaro, will attend meetings at IATA for that purpose, so that at the end of the day, there is really alignment of the data. So maybe we should give a round of applause to the roundtable speakers. And I would like to thank you for the time and for the effort. I would also like to ask, before we go all and have some refreshments, I would like to ask Mr. David Evans from Bull, who sponsors this break, to come to the podium and say a few words.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Susan. Notwithstanding anything else you might have said, I think it is my job in closing this session to allow you to escape quickly, because I think that after all of the discussion we've heard this afternoon, I think now is the time to take a break and to take some time to talk amongst ourselves and to network. And so to that extent, Bull, as one of the sponsors of this year's conference, would very much like you to invite you to come and join us for some refreshments outside. Okay, thank you very much indeed.